So my name is Lierre Keith, and I live in Northern California. And I was a vegan for 20 years, and I wrote a book about that experience that's called The Vegetarian Myth: Food, Justice, and Sustainability. So when I was 16, I met another teenage girl who was a vegan. Her whole family were vegans. And that is actually the number one way that people become vegetarians or vegans, is they meet someone. So I met someone, and she was very convincing. Even at that young age, I was already somebody who was extremely concerned about the planet and about animals and about justice, and I was very impassioned. And you're sort of flailing around at that age trying to figure out who you are and what do you think, and can I find a framework that's going to explain everything that I think I know at this point, what's going to be helpful, what's going to make sense. And here she came with her vegan world, and it all made complete sense to me. I grew up in a very sort of urban suburban environment. I had no idea where food came from, not the first clue where any of this came from. And she told me all these horrible things about the conditions of animals in factory farms, and she's completely right about that. I mean, none of that has gotten any better in my lifetime. So I was utterly convinced, and within a week or two I had decided that I was going to also be a vegan, and I did. I jumped right in feast first, and I didn't look back for 20 years. It was a long 20 years. So that was how I became a vegan. And then my journey out, do you want me to? Okay, so 20 years go by. I immediately was having health problems on this diet. But the thing about being a vegan is that it's not just what you eat, it becomes who you are. For most of us anyway, it really becomes the main sense of our identity is being a vegan. And what that means is it's really hard to absorb counter information. Anything that would be threatening to that vegan worldview really feels like it's a threat to who you are. So it's an existential threat almost, like, well, none of this can be true, because then what am I left with? Who am I? What is my place in the world? So I couldn't absorb anything else. And so I'm going along, first of all, almost immediately having health problems, but also, I mean, I'm, like most young people, I'm still reading, I'm still engaging, I'm still thinking, I'm still talking, and I'm already finding information that's counter to what I'm believing as a vegan, and I can't let it in because it's too threatening. So that's this sort of dance that I did for 20 years of, okay, I'm accumulating all these facts and all of this knowledge about the food that I'm actually eating, and the cost of this food to the planet, and the cost of this food historically to human society, and how many actual animals might be dying because of what I'm eating. And all of that, I just keep putting it aside. So I'm living with this sort of, disjuncture between what I think I know, what I'm afraid to know. How is any of this ever going to come together? So it's a very bad place to be, especially for that long. I mean, you're very uneasy all the time, and it can make you very brittle, where you can't absorb anything else. And so you're very reactive all the time. If anybody comes at you with anything, even mildly questioning what you're doing, there's this sort of backlog of other things that you haven't wanted to handle. And, you're going to be angry in response. There's just this incredible reactivity all the time to it. And so it's a very brittle identity. And that's too bad, because, one thing that I like to say a lot, especially when talking to people who have been convinced by veganism, it's not the values that are the problem. The justice, compassion, sustainability, anything that questions human hubris or human entitlement, those are the only values that are going to get us to the world that we need. So it's not the values that are at issue. You will be the same person. Whether you're willing to engage with other information or not, you can still be that person. And even if you change your mind and decide this is not the diet for you, you will still be a person who cares about those things, because that's not the issue. The issue is, what is really the problem on this planet? What is really destroying, the basis of our biological existence? And what does agriculture have to do with that? And that was not something I could engage with when I was a vegan, because the very food that I was eating is the food that's the problem. I was never a junk food vegan. There are these people who essentially eat potato chips, and I guess Oreos are vegan now. When I became a vegan, they were not. I was sort of the last holdout where there was still lard in the cookies. So I have never, I mean, I don't even know when the last time I had an Oreo, but anyway, regardless, I was not that kind of vegan. I was like, I had little charts on the refrigerator, like where you're going to get your amino acids and lentils and black beans and brown rice and this and that. Like, how do you combine them all? And I was very serious about this. And my mother, of course, was very concerned. It was me and my sister. We both of us went vegan. And she was terrified that we were going to do ourselves great harm. As it turns out, she was correct. Of course, I wasn't going to think about that when I was 17, but yeah, so she said, all right, you can do this, but I want you to make sure that you're doing this properly. And she had friends that were vegetarians, so all these books were, you know, sort of suggested as things we might investigate. So I had all the good books, and I read them all, and I thought that I had this all down. So I didn't eat processed food. I didn't eat anything that had white flour in it. Like, that was absolutely off. I wouldn't touch it if it had white flour. No white sugar, absolutely not. I mean, the only sweeteners I would eat were like fruit juice or maple syrup. I lived in Massachusetts, so that seemed like something I could eat. Of course, you never eat honey, forget that. Yeah, so I mean, I was extremely, extremely strict about all of this, and it still failed. So a typical breakfast when I was a vegan would probably be something like, I would have brown rice for breakfast with some kind of lentils or perhaps like black beans, little tamari on there, a little soy sauce to give it some flavor, and steamed vegetables. So I would have that. And then lunch would be probably more brown rice, some tofu, green salad, something along those lines. The problem is they would be snacking all day long. And the main reason for this is the human body really was not intended to process that much sugar. So here I thought I was doing the right thing by not eating white sugar, by keeping processed sugars out of my diet. But every single meal I ate was essentially nothing but a load of sugar. Now, you can call that complex carbohydrate if it makes you feel better. It's not actually any different, because once it hits your intestines, it is, of course, broken down into, guess what, simple sugars. That's how it's absorbed into your bloodstream. It's the only way it can be absorbed. Everything is broken down into its smallest little part. So you're eating a load of sugar. So there's this huge rise in your blood sugar, and then, of course, the inevitable crash. And that inevitable crash is because our bodies can only function in a very narrow range of sugar. If you have too much or too little, it's a biological emergency. So now you've pushed it up. And the emergency response of the body is your pancreas will now release a huge flood of insulin, because you're over the safety zone, and especially your brain is going to be really sensitive to this. You will die if you don't get that back down. So out comes the insulin from the pancreas, sends out this flood, and it's a really blunt instrument, insulin, in fact. And this is one reason you can tell that we really were not meant to do this. It's not finely tuned. So in comes insulin, circulates through your blood. It grabs absolutely every last thing that it can and shoves it into cells out of your bloodstream so that your brain isn't going to go into overload. And now it's in there, you can't get it back out. The insulin is called the fat storage hormone, and that's what it does. It grabs all this stuff out, puts it away so that it doesn't do immediate damage, but it keeps it out. So you've eaten a meal, you think you're going to have energy, and you might feel better for 20 minutes, but you can't actually access that. As long as your insulin levels are high, you can't actually access that energy. It's keeping it out of your bloodstream to keep you alive. But it's an emergency response. So your blood sugar now crashes. Okay, it's not like insulin can tell, oh, do you have too much or too little? It doesn't know. It just says, oh my God, there's an emergency. My job is to grab it and get it out of here, and that's what it does. Well, now it's gone too far the other direction. So now you feel like you're dying unless you put more food in your mouth. So that was essentially how I lived for 20 years. And at first it was like every 2 hours, and then it's every hour and a half, and then it's every hour. And by the end it was, honestly, every 20 minutes. Like, you just have to keep putting little bits of food in your mouth. You're just grazing all day long. And it didn't really occur to me like normal people don't live this way, because honestly, pretty much everybody in America is on that constant blood sugar roller coaster. Whether you're a vegetarian or not, you're still starting your day with what? A bagel and orange juice and maybe a bowl of cereal. It's just a pile of sugar. And I feel so sorry for these kids. Like, how are you supposed to go to school and learn when you're fighting that it feels terrible when your blood sugar crashes. I mean, you're shaking, and emotionally you can't keep a stable state, and you have no idea what's going on. It's like, I just want to cry again and I don't know why. And that was how I lived for 20 years. I had to figure this out for myself. Why was this all so terrible? And why did I feel so dramatically different within 8 hours of not eating that way? Because I did. It was like this revelation that it was the blood sugar. It's hell living with that. And then the other problem is that the big chemical that your body releases to get this all under control is adrenaline. So you're on this constant adrenaline high, which of course is just going to kill your adrenal glands. So now you're heading into exhaustion because, again, yeah, if you're running from a lion once a week, sure, you want some adrenaline. You don't need that 5 times a day just to deal with food, you know? So all of us are in this state of constant worn out exhaustion from the, continuous adrenaline rush just from eating. I mean, that's what we're doing to ourselves. So no, there's no way to keep a stable mood state. But of course, that level of insulin also just creates tremendous problems throughout the whole body. So, from the inside out, you're doing terrible damage to all your blood vessels. And this is one reason that we have such terrible problems with heart disease in this country, with cardiovascular disease, is we're rotting our veins and our arteries from the inside. And a lot of that has to do with the damage from the constant flood of insulin. And then also the inflammation. It does kick off this terrible inflammatory response every time you eat like kind of a high sugar meal, essentially. And we now know that, inflammation is responsible, it's implicated across the board. Everything from Alzheimer's to arthritis is somewhere. There's inflammation is something you have to get under control. So, I mean, all of these chronic diseases that we consider sort of normal, they're not. This is something we've done to ourselves by taking up agriculture, first of all, 10,000 years ago, and then taking up the industrialized version, which is sort of the whole thing on steroids. But that original damage, that starts 10,000 years ago when we completely shifted the sort of basic way that we were going to support ourselves as a species when we switched from, a diet that was our ancestral diet, the diet of, protein and tons of animal fat is really what keeps the human animal healthy. And we switched to essentially a diet of nothing but sugar. And the archaeological record is really clear. Every time across the globe people take this up, first thing that happens, they shrink 6 inches and their teeth fall out. And it's not hard to understand why that would be true. Like the mineral content collapses in the diet. It's the highest minerals content is absolutely from meat. You're just not going to get that much from grain. There just isn't that much of it in there to start with. And then if you're not eating enough animal fat, your body doesn't have any way to absorb the minerals out of your digestive tract. So even if you were eating a lot, you wouldn't be able to access them. And that's the problem. So all around the world, when people substitute animal products for this kind of plant-based diets of grain and whatever, that's the pattern. And it's very clear. Any archaeologist can look at a bone and tell you within 10 seconds whether they were farmers or whether they were the original hunters, because the bones of the agriculturalists are brittle and they're small and they're just riddled with the signs of diseases, whereas the hunter-gatherer bones are always long and strong and dense and just beautiful. They're in perfect shape. So one of the things I had always heard, that one of the best ways to keep your carbon footprint down, really basic, is to grow your own food, or at least eat within your sort of local region. At this point we're spending 2,000, 3,000 calories to get to us food that is worth maybe 100 calories. So there's like the 2,000 mile Caesar salad. It's completely insane. Or then you have things like calorie-free beverages, and it can take like 3,000 calories to make 1 can of a beverage that has literally nothing in it. Like, it's completely insane. Like, what are we doing? So regardless, I think, well, I'm gonna grow my own food. I'm gonna garden. I'm gonna learn how to do this. I didn't grow up in a gardening family. This wasn't a thing I had ever done. So I start reading books about gardening and Organic Gardening magazine. I'm completely enthusiastic about this project. And it's great. It's great fun, and it helped. I was very depressed at that point in my life. The vegan diet was not helping in that regard, especially. But the garden gave me great joy, and it was an amazing thing to be outside every day and to watch plants come to life. It was very, very satisfying on a spiritual level, just to be engaged. It also makes it harder as a vegan because there's this terrible ethical dilemma that you come up against of, all right, I don't want to hurt animals. Animals are clearly sentient. They're like us in so many ways, and I wouldn't murder a human. I don't want to kill an animal. And it was a huge motivating factor in me becoming a vegan, was I did not want harm to come to any animals. Well, if I eat plants, that's okay. The problem was I was still making a hierarchy, that here is all of life, and I can see that it's really a web. It's more of a circle than anything else. But I'm still making this hierarchy where animals like me in very specific ways count as moral beings, as beings who are worthy of my care. I'm going to put them sort of at the center of my moral universe. But why not plants? So as a vegetarian, I find myself making these arguments about, well, they don't have nerves, so they don't feel the way that animals feel. Therefore, they're somehow not as worthy. But I also was quite aware that I was making a hierarchy, and that hierarchy was the problem in my mind. The problem is that, people are above animals, and animals are above plants, and white people are above black people, and men are above women, and rich people are above poor people, and all of this is what Riane Eisler calls the dominator mode. And I could see that that was very much the problem across the globe, that we have set up one after another these cultures that are just based on domination. And I didn't want to be part of that. For me, becoming a vegan was a way to say, I'm doing my best in my personal life not to be participating in these terrible hierarchies. And yet I was still making one, which was animals are better than plants. Animals are worthy of concern, plants are not. And the more that I got outside and got into the garden, the less I could hang on to that, because they were clearly alive and they were clearly happy. And I felt happy being around them and watching them sprout from little tiny seeds into, their first beginning leaves was it made me weep with joy. It made me feel so happy. And maybe not everybody feels that, but for me it was I'm alive, they're alive, we're all here together on this planet doing this amazing thing together. And it's just, I could feel it mending my soul. Just being around the plant people was incredible. And, you can go to other cultures on the planet and find people who in fact do exactly that. That's what their role is in their tribe, in their culture, is to be the plant medicine people. And they have incredible conversations with plants, and they will talk to you about how to get healing from plants and how plants love you, and the trees are our elders and they have incredible wisdom. We don't have that in America in the year 2000. This isn't a thing that anybody even takes seriously, but I felt that in the garden, and it really helped me, profoundly helped me, and I was so grateful. And yet I was going to kill them and eat them, just like I said I wasn't going to do with animals. And this was just a terrible, terrible ethical dilemma in my brain, that I lived with that contradiction for years as a gardener. Well, then it gets worse, right? So now you've planted your first garden. You've come to grips with some of this in some way. All right, I'm going to have a garden. Well, the first problem is soil, because of course, as an organic gardener, you know that your first line of defense is to have really good soil. You have to give the plants what they need. Hopefully they can fight off anybody who comes to get them. But to do that, they have to have really good soil, and pretty quickly you realize, it's gonna have to be manure, or it's gonna have to be blood meal and bone meal. The soil wants to eat animals, and that's what soil is. It's dead plants, it's dead animals, and in fact it's alive, and that's what it is. Literally, that's what it is. It's dead plants and animals with a whole bunch of little tiny microorganisms, constantly working on it, degrading it. The detritivores are breaking it down and making all those nutrients available again to the cycle of life. Without them, none of us are here. Right? We can't do that, but they can. And some of them are animals. Right? They're little tiny animals. And 1 tablespoon of soil can have over 1 million living creatures in it. That's an incredible amount of life. It's alive. It's not insensate dirt. And 1 square meter of topsoil can have over 1,000 different species of animals. That's just animals. 1,000 species. It's so alive. And that's what it requires, is dead plants and dead animals. That is just how life is recycled. So none of this is making any sense to me as a vegan, because I want my plants to be like me. I want them to not hurt animals ever. But I'm going to have to give them dead animals or some kind of animal product for them to be happy. And it was a terrible blow to my vegan worldview. I didn't know how to absorb that. I didn't, in fact. I never was able to do it, because in fact it doesn't make sense. it's the cycle of life. It's what it is. So there I've got my little garden, and I'm like, oh no, now I'm gonna have to get manure. Like, I know where this ends. There's no way out of this. And in the meantime, I've got all my little plants, my mostly lettuce there that's in the first garden bed early in the spring, and every night the slugs are eating it. And when I say eat it, I mean they demolish it. If you've gardened, you know what I'm talking about. It's just clear cut every night. So I go back to the store, I buy some more starts, I plop my little plants back in, and the next night, same thing, and the next night, same thing. I'm like, well, I have two choices here. I can just accept that I'm not gonna have a garden because the slugs are gonna eat it all, or I can try to figure out what to do about the poor slugs. Is there a way to keep them out? Is there a way to repel them? Can I talk to them? I tried all that. I sang them songs, I begged them, I pleaded, I did little prayers. It didn't work. They were hungry, they wanted, it's good lettuce, it's little, it's tiny, it's very fresh, it's very green, and it's, like super soft. Like, I get why they want to eat it. It's yummy. Same reasons I want to eat it, and they're going to get there first because they're there in the night when I'm asleep. So this keeps happening over and over. They're eating the lettuce, I'm replanting it. I'm like, I'm going to have to give up, or I've got to find a way. So then it's like, well, people just kill them. That's what they do. Like, that's just what gardeners do. And slugs are sort of the bane of gardeners. Maybe not true in the desert, but anywhere I've ever lived, slugs are like a serious issue. How do you get rid of slugs? Is there a way to kill them that's kinder? I don't know. Like, I'm going to have to kill something, and it's going to be really hard. So I was like, well, people use beer, and they're really attracted to beer. They love the smell of it. So if you leave it out in little containers, they'll drink it, and then they get drunk, and they fall in, and they drown. And I thought, well, it's a good way to go. Like, they're probably really happy because they're drunk. Maybe they're maudlin drunks. I don't know. Like, maybe slugs aren't happy when they're drunk. I'm going to assume they're feeling pretty happy, and then they die, and that's it. You're done with the slugs. So I did. I went and I bought a bottle of beer, and I put it out in little containers, and I woke up at 3 a.m, and I was just in a cold sweat because I was going to be killing the slugs, and I couldn't do it. I could not kill the slugs. So I put on my shoes, and I ran outside, and I freed them all. I saved them. Some of them were already starting to drown, and I got them all out, and I was like, I don't know what to do now. What am I going to do with the slugs? So the next morning, I thought, well, I could just collect them every night, and I could just take them somewhere else. I could like repurpose them somewhere else. All right, that's what I'm going to do. So I did. I collected a whole bunch of them, and I had them in a little plastic container. I was like, all right. And I got on my bike, and I rode down to where there was like this big forested area down the street. I was like, great, I'll just set them free. Fly, be free, little slugs. And I got them out of the container, and I just sat there for a while, and I watched them. And it was such a bad moment because it was a good moment and a bad moment. It was a good moment because it was one of those like real defining sort of, I'm now becoming an adult sort of instances that one might have when I was too old for this, but I had missed it somehow. So I'm sitting there watching the slugs very slowly make their way into this forest, and I thought, why do I think these slugs are going to be okay here? I mean, there are already slugs in this forest. There are exactly as many slugs as there should be in this forest, because that's what forests do. Like, the slugs that are here are living in balance with the opossums and the raccoons and whoever else is eating slugs. They're already here doing this together. All I'm doing is overpopulating slugs. So if these 10 slugs don't die, another 10 slugs are going to die. It's not an endless amount of food in this forest. There's exactly as much as there is. That's how populations work. Who am I fooling? Like, I just condemned a whole bunch of slugs to die of hunger. They're not going to live. Like, there's not like a low population here. There's as many exactly as there need to be, because the forest wouldn't be here otherwise. Like, it knows how to handle it. Like, all the species are working together. So it sort of collapsed in my brain. Like, this is not a way out either. It's not a way out. There is nothing I can do. The slugs and I are, a battle to the death here over the lettuce. Like, they're going to eat it or I'm going to eat it. We both can't eat it. There's no way around this. Like, they're going to have to die if I'm going to eat this lettuce. And it was terrible. And I thought, well, I just won't. I will only grow things that the slugs don't want. That's the only way I can see to get over this. And it was like this huge relief. Oh, thank God I can stop thinking about this, because it was terrible. So the next time I'm at the store, I'm like, okay, I'll just buy lettuce. It's so easy. I've bought food my whole life. I don't need to grow it. I'll just buy it. And it was like, oh, thank goodness. And I went over and I'm holding this head of lettuce, and I couldn't stop. Like, I've already had the realization. And so there it is in my brain. Like, who are you fooling? Whoever grew that lettuce for you killed slugs. And they killed more than slugs. They killed everything they had to kill. They killed deer. This is New England. They killed deer for you to get that lettuce. They killed rabbits. They killed a whole bunch of stuff. Like, you're never going to know what exactly died for that food, but animals died. Animals that you do care about very deeply, because they have cute little faces and they're fluffy and you want them to be happy and you would like to pet them and be friends with them. I don't really want to be friends with slugs, but I had pet rabbits. Like, I knew what rabbits were all about. And of course, deer are beautiful. And like, I don't want to kill those things. I was like, there was no way around it. And that was really the moment that I was just, you're a grown up now. You have to face what is the actual cost of your life on this planet. There are animals that are going to die. Even in this like super rarefied vegan world that you've made for yourself, you've tried so hard to keep all this information out. You can't do it anymore because you tried. You've tried to have your own garden and it's not possible. You are going to kill animals. There's no way out of it. And it was a terrible moment, and it was also freeing in that way that when you give up believing in Santa Claus, you're finally facing reality. And that was that moment for me, was holding that lettuce, was just, yep, the animals are gonna die. And your only choice now is to do it well. That is the only choice left. The death-free option, you've given it up. It was a fairy tale. It was never going to come true. You needed it to believe it for whatever reason. You clung to that belief. But it's over now, Lierre. Like, that's just how it is. You've got to be an adult now. So my vegan life rolls along for 2 decades. I'm coming to the end now. Pretty much everyone that I knew who was close to me in my life had already given it up. The damage was just too profound, it was too complete. And one by one, they sort of come to me. My sister, all kinds of people. I can't do this anymore, I'm too exhausted, it hurts too much. The joint pain especially. And a lot of us had been down this road of acupuncture, and the acupuncturist has just said very bluntly, you can't keep doing this. You've come to the end. Humans just can't live like this. And then they would try it. They would eat a whatever, was the most palatable in that moment, and would feel better. And then, I would have these conversations where they'd come to me and say, for 6 months now, I've been eating XYZ and I feel dramatically better. You need to know that. And also, I do think you should try it. You've got way too many problems. I think that if you ate some meat, and I was not ready to hear it. So every time I was like, no, you just didn't do it right. You need to just take B12 supplements. Like, that doesn't really work. You really do have to take supplements. So just take the B12, please. No, they had all left it already. And I was still the one that was just digging in my heels. There's gotta be a way. So I finally had the same experience where I went to a doctor of Chinese medicine, and I had to hear it from somebody that I was going to really respect. So it had to be somebody who was older than me, more experienced than me, more educated than me, and he had been doing Chinese medicine his whole life. He was actually from China, had immigrated to the United States, and he had incredible life history. But regardless, I went into this appointment like, I just feel like I'm dying and I don't know what to do. And the main diagnostic tool in Chinese medicine is they take your pulses. So that's, they read it. It's very different than just the blood that you might do as a nurse or whatever. Anyway, he goes to take my pulses, and his face just absolutely bewildered, staring at me in kind of horror. And he's like, "There's nothing here. I mean, you have no chi. There is no life force in your body. Like, how are you alive?" Like, he just couldn't believe it. Like, he's just never felt anything like it. He's like, "There's nothing here. So what do you eat?" He has to know, what are you eating? I said, "Well, I'm a vegan and I don't." "You don't even eat fish?" "No, I would never eat fish. I don't eat fish." "You can't do this. This you cannot do." That's what he says. You're gonna die. Humans, it's not possible. You've got to eat some meat. And I started crying. And he's like, "Well, do you have a religious belief?" And I was like, "Well, yes, but no. I mean, it's not anything it's just with all my heart. I don't want to hurt animals." And he said, "Well, the big fish eat the little fish, and the little fish are also eating little things, and it's just how life is. You can't get out of it." And I knew he was right. I mean, going into that appointment, I already sort of knew in my brain that there wasn't going to be any other answer to get out of my physical condition without probably having to do this. But I was still hoping, maybe there's an herb I can take. Maybe, he did a lot of Qigong, so maybe there's a special exercise I could try. There's some other way to get what I'm clearly lacking, and it was absolutely not. So I thought, all right, well, everybody else has been through this. I'm going to try. I thought the one thing that I could bear to eat would be tuna fish because, and it's a very ridiculous reason, but here it is, it wouldn't have to touch my dishes. We as humans are able to create so many bizarre rules about food where it's taboo and it's unclean and it's absolutely horrifying, like on a gut level, on a visceral level. And I can really understand those people who eat kosher or eat halal, where you don't even want it touching. You have to have separate dishes for everything, and it has to be this exact way. Like, I understand how we get into that mindset. It seems bizarre now that I'm out of it, but it was so clear to me, I don't even want this in my house. It felt so unclean to bring meat into the house. But if I bring it in a totally separate container, and I eat it with a plastic fork that is not mine, I can just get rid of it when the experiment is over, and I won't have disturbed the beautiful, clean, nonviolent vegan energy of my household. It's the best I can do here. So I bought a can of tuna fish on the way home, and I got a plastic fork from the supermarket, and I took it home and I undid it in the sink so it didn't splash anywhere, and then it was just me and the tuna. I was like, I'm just gonna have to do this somehow, and I don't know how. I don't know how I'm gonna make this happen. And I just stared at it, and it kind of stared at me, and I just was like, well, this is it. I just have to do it. And I made myself do it. And it was all over. It was a really intense 10 seconds of just life energy finally in my body again that had not been there for 20 years. And I don't have a way to explain this in scientific terms. I just know enough other people that have experienced exactly this, that it is true, that I was finally alive. And I had no idea what I was even missing until I ate that bite of tuna fish. But I felt it the whole way down. It started in my mouth. It wasn't even like when it hits your stomach. It was the entire way down, just radiating through my whole body of just, wow, life force. I could feel alive again. And then I cried. I think for a lot of vegans, there's a very clear black and white issue about killing something versus not killing something, death versus not death. Because I would look at my plate, and what mattered to me was, is there something dead on this plate? So if there was a piece of meat on it, then that was something I was not going to eat. And if there was no meat on it, then that felt like it was death-free, and that was what I was willing to consume. Learning to garden, and then also actually engaging with information about the nature of agriculture, changed all of that, because even the foods that were plant foods, there's no way to produce those without massive amounts of animal death. Now, a lot of vegans will say things like, well, I didn't intend to kill those animals, so it doesn't matter. And that doesn't really hold water for me, and it doesn't really make sense, honestly, because fine, I can look at the brown rice and say, well, that's not a dead animal, but A, the brown rice ate dead animals, and B, you know that animals had to die to create that rice patty. That's what agriculture is. So because you don't want to acknowledge the fact that animals died, somehow they didn't die, those animals still died, right? So that argument just doesn't really hold water. It didn't hold water for me either when I was a vegan. I just thought there was a way to do it that wouldn't involve the dead animals. I just thought there potentially was a way to actually grow those foods and that there wouldn't be dead animals. But the people who just say out and out, I can't, it's the animals that are, that part I just don't understand, because your knowing about it or not knowing about it doesn't affect the life or the death of that animal. I mean, the point is to do it well, because that's all we've got. It's really our only options. Are we going to be the death that's killing everything, or are we going to be the death that's part of the cycle of life that actually makes life stronger? Those are really our only options. So to try to make a third option that says, well, actually, they're not dying, but if they are dying, I don't want to know about it, so it doesn't matter, just seems like the ultimate in denial. It doesn't change a single animal death. So I don't really find that a compelling argument, when vegetarians say that kind of thing. And I don't think it's not gonna age well for them either. Like, eventually they're gonna have to say, yeah, right, animals are dying, so what is involved here? And I think that the real moment for me was trying to sort of come to grips with what agriculture was, like the nature of this food that I'm eating. Where does it come from? And is it sustainable? Is it something that's something we should be doing as humans? Like, how did all this begin? Because we're not really taught that in school. I mean, I do remember in 4th grade having a teacher who explained, okay, there's this pattern called civilization, and there's this thing called agriculture. It's this one very specific activity that humans figured out how to do 10,000 years ago, and it saved us from hunger and from, chronic worry and from this backbreaking labor of being hunter-gatherers. Everything changed when we finally figured out how to do agriculture, and so it's this amazing thing, and that's where you grow wheat and corn and rice. And I don't know, I was 10 years old, whatever, it seemed to make sense, but of course none of that ends up being true. That honestly, hunter-gatherers live a pretty good life. It's maybe 20 hours a week of work to provide for your basic stuff, whereas with agriculture, it really is backbreaking labor from morning till night. And that's why agriculture is always based on slavery. Somebody has to do the work. So that is the pattern of civilization. There's always about 90% of the population that's enslaved, and then about 10% of the people get some leisure time to do things like philosophy and whatever, and the fun stuff, governance, whatever, and everybody else is essentially a slave. It also creates a whole nother level in society of the people who are soldiers, because you've got to keep all those people enslaved. They're not going to do it just cause. I mean, it's by force. And the other problem with agriculture, and this is what was disturbing to me, of course, as a young vegan, is that it is inherently destructive. Because what it is, you take a piece of land and you clear every living thing off it, and I mean down to the bacteria, and then you plant it to human use. So in very brute terms, it is biotic cleansing. Right? We've all heard of ethnic cleansing. Well, this is biotic cleansing, because it's everything. It's every living creature is cleared off of that land. And then you grow one thing on it, and all of that food goes to humans. So everything that used to live there now has nowhere to go. And this is why around the globe, 200 species are going extinct every day. Every day, 200 species are gone forever. And it's because we live now in a global agricultural society. There are, I think, 46 tribes of hunter-gatherers remaining, that's it, in tiny little places where most people don't want to go. Anything that agriculture could have taken, it has taken. So that's 98% of the world's forests and 99% of the world's prairies are gone. Less than 1/10% of the tallgrass prairie still exists. It's all gone. So what was there before? You can read historic descriptions of an observer sitting on a rock for 4 days and watching as a single herd of bison thundered by. It's a single herd. There were probably 10 million mule deer, 10 million elk, 30 million antelope, 60 million bison, and somewhere around 5 billion prairie dogs in North America 150 years ago. And they're all gone. And where they went is A, into the atmosphere, because when they're vaporized, that's carbon up there. Wheat, corn, and soy. It's just taken over. So this was an entire thriving, lush continent with that kind of life. In my lifetime, we'll never see that. None of us will. The idea of that many bison thundering across the landscape is, there's no way to even imagine what that must have been like. And they're all gone. Those are the animals that died so that I could eat a vegan diet of wheat and corn and soy. So to say, oh, there's no death in my food, we are utterly fooling ourselves to take that out. The other problem with agriculture is that it can't be sustained. Even if you're willing to accept that we're allowed to take over essentially the entire surface of the planet just for humans, you're destroying soil every time you do this. And to put a number on it, one season of growing one of those annual crops, you can lose 2,000 years of soil just in one season. There were farms on the first day of the Dust Bowl in South Dakota that lost all their soil in one day, in one single day. And you can look at pictures, because photography had been invented. You can look at pictures of what that looked like, and it's like a mountain of soil moving across the landscape. And it's unbelievable. That soil was 12 feet deep in places when the European conquerors first got there, and there's nothing left. So what we have been eating for the last 50 years is fossil fuel. Because by 1950, the planet was pretty well out of topsoil. This is an inherently destructive process. And what took its place was, of course, fossil fuel. So now what we're eating, if you're eating grain, you're eating oil on a stalk. This is not a plan with the future. That oil is going to run out. We're probably already past the peak. And we're faced with the cliff now, whether anybody wants to acknowledge that or not. We've really painted ourselves into a corner as a species. So I want you to picture an acre of land, and we're going to go 2 different directions. So on the first acre of land, we're going to do what we've been doing for 10,000 years. We're going to clear the life off that land. Everything is gone. So no plants, no animals, nobody has anywhere to live. Off into extinction you go. Plants, we don't even know their names, gone. Okay, nobody's there. And now we're just going to plant corn. So it's an annual crop. It's not going to have a huge deep root system. It can't. It only has 1 season to grow. So it's not like a tree or a prairie grass where there's this very intense root system way, way down, into past the surface of the planet, way down to the rock layer. None of that's there. So what happens now, every time it rains, the rain has no physical channel to actually get down into the soil. Because how water enters the soil is through those root channels, right? Well, the channels end pretty quickly. They're short, so there's no recharge going on. So the water just flows off the surface of the soil. It takes all kinds of particulates with it as it's destroying the soil. Off they run into the local river, which is now destroyed because of all the silt running off. All the fish are going to die because now the water's clogged with silt. Whatever trees there are, perhaps in the riparian system, they're all going to die too because as the water table is just dropping, not recharged, even the trees can't reach it anymore. You've basically created a desert. In the meantime, for maybe 800 years, you can plant corn, and with that acre of corn, you can now send it off down the road to basically a factory. You've got cows standing around on cement floors in a steel building, and you could feed that corn to those cows. It'll make them really sick, but it will also make them really fat really fast. So you've got cheap meat, very cheap meat, and humans will eat it, and they will also get sick because none of it's right. The amino acid profile is wrong, and the fatty acid profile is wrong. So from one end of this system to the other, it's just death and destruction. You've got a devastated landscape for miles around, semi-permanently, and sick cows, sick humans at the end of it, all from this 1 acre of corn. That's about what you'll get out of it, is 1 cow's worth of corn. We're going to do something else on this land. We're going to leave it in perennial polyculture. We're going to leave it in the prairie that it really wants to be. And instead, we're going to put the cow on it. We're not going to put her in a horrible building where she never gets to see light or eat real grass. We're going to put her where she is happy. So now you have a happy cow, but you've got a bunch of other really happy creatures. First of all, every square meter should have 25 different plants, a level of diversity that is what life creates. It fills in every niche, and all of those plants need each other. This is like, the more you find out about how plants do things, the more incredible it is. They help each other, they communicate with each other, they share nutrients with each other. Oh, you need some more of this, I'll send it to you. Oh, you're being attacked by cicadas, here, I'll send you this. Like, they do incredible things as a community, and that's what life is. It's a community. So you've got all the plants. You're also going to have a whole bunch of animals now that didn't have anywhere to go in that first scenario. They now have their homes back, right? So you're going to have everything from microscopic creatures that we never see, but who are absolutely important for the nutrient cycle. They're ground zero for how it happens. We need all of them. But then all the creatures that we love. You've got ground-dwelling birds that need a place to nest. They now have a home. You've got birds that are migrating. They need a place to stop for the night. They've got a place now to be there. You're going to have little amphibians. You're going to have reptiles. You're going to have the really glorious megafauna that we all love. You're going to have really big animals moving on through, part of their range. They've all got a home now, that's the point, and they've all got food. Starting with the ruminants. All of this depends on the ruminants. You've got to have that cow back on that pasture, or none of this will happen. And as all of them are working to do this, they're also making those really deep root channels because they're helping the plants be healthier. So now you've got those channels back down into the soil. Oh, when it rains, hallelujah, the water table is now actually being restored, which means that not only are the plants happier, but the local waterways actually are going to have water again. That giant sponge is now finally able to get filled with water again. So all throughout the dry season, there's water to draw up. The deeply rooted plants can do that, and they can make water available to all these other animals that have no way to get it. So you've repaired all of this. Everything that was destroyed can now come back. So even if you only care about the animals, like, that's the only way to do it, is give them their home back. It's such a simple thing, but it's so profound. And also, if we really are going to care about global warming, this is it. The only creatures now that are capable of getting that carbon out of the sky, sequestered again, it's the ruminants. It's the ruminants in the grasses. It's our only hope. And the statistics on this are really fantastic too, which is why I have so much hope about it. It's something like, even if across the world we could repair 75% of the world's trashed out grasslands, we could sequester in about 12 years. We could sequester most of the carbon that's been released since the beginning of the industrial age. So 12 years is a pretty short amount of time. It's not like thousands of years into the future. It's not even hundreds of years. It's like 12 years. That's my lifespan. Like, we could get this done. And really, it's not even us. All we have to do is let the cows and the grasses, the ruminants, and their plant cohorts, all we have to do is let them do the thing they want to do, which is just live. Like, they will just naturally make this happen. All we have to do is get out of the way, and everything will come back. Because life wants to live, right? And they all know how to do it. It's not us. It's just, we just have to let it happen, that's all. The thing about ruminants and grass is that they evolve together. Grasses are different from other plants in a bunch of ways, but the main one is they actually grow from the crown and not from the tip. And most other plants, it's the other way around. They grow from the end. But grasses clearly evolved being grazed. So the action of the grazer, chomping right there, close to the ground, stimulates root growth. And this is how prairies end up with such incredibly dense root systems underground, is the cattle stimulates it, the grass put down more roots, then they send up more growth to the top, then the cow comes by and eats it again. And in that cycle, the soil is just growing deeper and deeper and deeper with sort of each rotation through there. And that's why, you have soil that's 12 feet deep, in the American prairie. Now, most of that has been destroyed for agriculture. I have a friend who, I know this sounds like one of those cliches, but she is Native American, and she does have, some very traditional family members. And one of the things she said to me was, it gave me the most solace probably of any single sentence that I've heard. And she said, for something to live, something else has to die. And she said it very compassionately to me, but she meant it. This is the wisdom that really every human being should know. And I'm sorry that got broken in your culture, but this is what we know in my world. And anyone can observe this. Anyone can go outside and see it. It's so obvious that for something to live, something else has to die. And in that understanding comes, or should come, humility, the humbleness of, wow, so much life makes my life possible. And I need to do everything I can to make that worthy, to make my life, to not make them sorry that they had to die, that I carried on in the best way that I could and did what was needed and, was a responsible person who cared about the things that matter and tried to make it better, because things are really bad right now, no matter where you look. And so I found a great deal of strength in that, and in the way that she said it as well, but also just in those words. For something to live, something else has to die. It's true in the garden. Every one of my vegetables needed dead things. That's what soil is. And it's true for all the animals, whether we're apex predators or whether we're somewhere else, kind of in the trophic pyramid. It doesn't matter. Something is going to die to feed you. And even plants, some of them actively kill animals, like tomatoes, as it turns out. There are plants that have little spiny things up their vines, and they actually skewer insects onto them, and then they absorb them. They suck their guts out, essentially. They suck out their all the living stuff in an insect gets into the tomato. That's what you're eating when you eat tomatoes. I would not have wanted to know that when I was a vegan, but yeah, there's dead animals in your tomato, very directly in your tomato. And there's not any way out of this. So honestly, what I've come to is, our choices are, we can be part of the death that's killing everything. And that really started with agriculture. Up until then, humans, we were just participants like everybody else. And we'll never know. It's not like I can go back 50,000 years and watch the people painting Lascaux and the beautiful cave drawings. It seems to me that this is very much an act of great reverence and thanksgiving. Thank you. Because all that's all over those caves is the giant animals that we ate. That's all we drew, our first art project. was the megafauna and the megafemales. It's both saying, thank you. This is what gives us life, is being born from a woman and then eating. This is it. This is the life that is ours. And so we can be a part of that. We can learn to be humble participants again, or we can keep being these destructive monsters. And that destruction starts with agriculture. That is where the original wound was, back in human culture. And agricultural societies always end up doing the same things. They end up militarized. They end up with huge proportions of people enslaved. They end up imperialist. They have to. They destroy their own soil. They destroy their own water, their own trees. They take it all, they use it, and then they have to conquer the neighbors and do it to them. So there's always that bloated power center surrounded by conquered colonies. There have been 34 civilizations. They've all ended in collapse. This one's not going to be any different. The only difference is we figured out how to draw fossil fuel into it. So it's gone on a little bit longer than it should have. The end is still waiting. I mean, it's not going to end any other way. Unless we decide, as a global society now, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to pull back. We're going to let the world repair. We're going to give women and girls full human rights, which is really the only way to drop the birth rate. It happens very quickly if you do that. I mean, there's plenty of hope still on this planet. We don't have to end in these dystopian Mad Max scenarios where there's nothing left except, people in crazy costumes shooting each other, whatever. We don't have to end there in a terrible failed state. We really could, just by supporting democracy for all humans, full human rights for everyone, and then some act of care back toward the planet to let it repair itself, we could still pull things back from the brink. It really is not too late. I think that vegans and ethical omnivores and regenerative farmers have the world in common. I think that the world that we all want at the end of this is so similar. And I think it's the only world really that that's it. We have to repair the planet. And I think we all want that. To me, the problem is that the vegans won't work with us, that they see us as the enemy. And a lot of them do. That we're even worse than regular omnivores because we think that this can be done well, and they refuse to see that that might be true. So they think that we're even worse, we're even more devilish than the regular unthinking person, because how dare we apply our moral frameworks and not come up with veganism as the solution. So they really don't like us, and that's really too bad, because in some ways I think vegans are the people who care most about what's happening on this planet, and I understand their passion. And I certainly think their values are exactly the right values, the compassion and the justice. And they're very compelled. They really do want a better world. And they feel the suffering of all the animals. And that's all to the good. That is what we need. But we need those people activated in the correct direction. And the problem is that vegan values are not best embodied by a vegan diet. It's actually one of the most destructive ways that you can eat. There's nothing regenerative about it. You're not building topsoil. You're only destroying more. That's the problem. So if they really took their own ethics to heart and were willing to talk more and sort of engage with other information, I think in the end they're going to come out more on the side of a lot of us, which we're all talking about. How do we repair the planet? How do we repair topsoil? How do we repair prairies and forests? And what does human food look like from a repaired environment? And it's not agricultural foods. I don't think we can talk about the ethics of killing animals unless we include humans as one such animal. Because our health matters to us, and our day-to-day pain level matters very much to us. And if you're suggesting a diet to people that's going to make them feel sick and miserable all the time, just on kind of a basic level, they're not going to stick to it. So, on both levels, it's not going to work. It's not going to work morally because people are going to say, but what about me? I do have to count in here somewhere. And then just sort of on brass tacks, most people aren't going to continue to eat something that makes them feel sick all the time. It's not going to last. There's no future in telling people, well, you have to keep eating this way even though your joints are decaying and your fertility has completely dried up and your skin hurts because it's so flaky, and you're diabetic now and you're having angina every day from your heart disease. Nobody's going to stick with it. They're just not. If there's a way out of that kind of suffering and pain, or your autoimmune disease, they're not going to do it. It's not going to work. So it has to be part of, any conversation about ethics. Right, but what kind of a life are you condemning people to if you're telling them to eat food that's not actually appropriate for the full blossoming of the human body as well? I think it's hard to talk to sort of the average person about a lot of this. And I would include the average vegan in this, because most of us don't know where our food comes from. We honestly have no idea what is the cost to the planet, what is the cost to animals, what is the cost to the soil, what is the cost to these different biotic communities. I mean, we don't know what's happened around the globe. We don't know that 98% of the old growth forests are simply gone. We don't know that 99% of the prairies have been destroyed. We have no idea that that's what agriculture has done around the globe. And the easy part about being a vegan is that you have slogans. So you can say things like meat is murder, and it's an easy argument to make, and most people will respond to that. Like, yeah, you're right, like cows are cute, chickens are fun, they're sweet, like I can pet them, I can make eye contact with them, they take care of their young, just like I love my children. These are very compelling arguments. But they're not complete arguments. The problem with us is that what we have is a lot of information, and it takes a good 2 hours for me to walk anybody through this from beginning to end. I can't do it in 30 seconds. Like, I could say meat is murder, and immediately everybody can picture a cow and a calf. And we understand how much that cow loves her calf. It's visceral, and it should be. That's not a bad thing. I want people to care about animals and understand that they have sentience and they have suffering and they have moral standing. That's not bad. It's just that their arguments are super simple, and ours, it takes a long time. I have to walk people through all of this. Like, what is soil? Where did it come from? How is it built? How is it destroyed? What is civilization? What is agriculture? Why is this destructive? I've got to get them through all of that. Like, I can't do that in 30 seconds. There's nothing that compares to meat as murder. So I'm giving them a lot of information. They're going to have to go home and think about it, and then they're going to have to get more information. They're going to have more questions. Ultimately, what I'm after is knowledge, because all of that has to condense into patterns. That's what knowledge is. And ultimately, we're asking people for wisdom, which is a whole other level. That doesn't happen in a soundbite. So we're up against something that is, it's hard just to do it in a way that is like, it's not snappy, it's not quick. You're not going to convert people, in 3 minutes. And so I'm always at a disadvantage. I'm always asked to do these debates of I just don't even want to, because I can't do it in 3 minutes. There's no way. And I will agree with most of what the vegan says too, because in their 3 minutes, I know what they're going to talk about. They're going to talk about CAFOs, and they're going to talk about pregnancy crates for sows, and it's horrible, and I agree with you. So what are we even fighting about? It's it just can't be done. Now this bigger stuff, yeah, but it's gonna be hours. We're not gonna do it in 15 minutes on a stage. I need to walk you through all of this, and you're not gonna get it right away. It's concepts that you're gonna have to absorb, and it's not quick and easy. It's real information, and then it's real knowledge. So the things that went wrong for me, immediately I ended up with terrible blood sugar problems. So I was already hypoglycemic pretty quickly into this. There's a lot of diabetes in my family, so as the last person on the planet who ever should have tried this diet. Clearly we don't have super strong insulin receptors, and I wore mine out right away. So the blood sugar crashes were happening almost immediately. I just didn't know what it was. So there's that problem. About 2 years in, I ended up with degenerative discs in my spine. That's permanent. You don't get your joints back once they're destroyed. And that also took me a long time to get a serious diagnosis, because I was way too young. People don't have their spines fall apart at age 18 for no reason. When I eventually did get a diagnosis, which was well into this process, now they look at the MRI and they're like, so you were in a massive car accident, or you fell off a roof, or you went skydiving? Was that smart? It's like, no, it was the nutritional equivalent, honestly. So I have degenerative discs at 4 levels of my spine. It's a grade 4 derangement. It's really no fun. I will be in morphine level pain for the rest of my life. So there's that. I've got multiple autoimmune diseases, and autoimmune diseases, again, are diseases of civilization. We know that this is what happens to people who take up agricultural diets. The clearest one is the spread of wheat across Europe in the archaeological record. Right behind it is rheumatoid arthritis. It could not be clearer. The joints are just completely decayed from rheumatoid. So there's that. I also did quite a number on my reproductive organs. I pretty much stopped menstruating about a year into being a vegan, And then from that point forward, it was like anybody's guess when I was ever going to get a period. Now, I'm lucky in that I did not want to have children. But if I had wanted to have children, I can guarantee you that would have been a heartbreak. Like, why can I not get pregnant? What is wrong with my uterus? Why is this happening? And I did mention it to doctors now and then that this was a thing. And nobody ever had an explanation. I was like, well, you can go on birth control pills if you want. I'm like, well, I don't really want to do that. But why do I not? This just doesn't seem quite right. I'm young. I should be fertile and happy and all this should be happening, and it's not. And now, of course, I understand why. If you don't have fat in your diet, animal fat, if there's no cholesterol, all of your hormones are made from cholesterol. That's like the mother hormone. If you're not eating any, you have no way to make sex hormones, as well as any other hormones. Your body actually does really interesting things. It's trying to keep you alive. So on a day-to-day basis, if you don't have enough cholesterol, what your body will do is triage. It'll say, well, we don't need sex hormones right now. You're not going to die if you don't have a baby right now. We can put that off for some time, months, years, till there's better food available, when it's a better time to have a baby. We're going to take care of these things because you do need those moment to moment. So we're going to take all what little tiny cholesterol you do have. We're going to make more important things. We're going to put that aside for now. Well, I did that for 20 years. So none of that, just wasn't happening. And then, of course, soy is the other issue. I was eating a lot of soy, and that is definitely an endocrine disruptor, essentially. The phytoestrogens will interfere with both men's and women's hormones in ways that can be really profound and life-altering and not good. So when I started eating meat again, my cycle was much more regulated, but the real bingo for me was when I took soy completely out of my diet. And this is not an exaggeration. I got my period 2 weeks later, and I did not miss one again until I hit menopause. It was like clockwork every 28 days. So between the soy and eating enough cholesterol, it was completely cured. So I was one of those people. But the damage was already done, because of course I ended up with uterine fibroids that I had to have removed. My sister, who was also a vegan long-term, she ended up with endometriosis. It was absolutely caused by the soy. She had to have a hysterectomy. So, there is like layers of suffering in every one of these stories about what's gone wrong with me. So there was all that, and then I also, some of it was, not anywhere near as profound or important, but they were minor things that do affect your life. So for instance, I had horrible dry skin being a vegan, and that's very common. You're just not eating enough fat, and it's not enough animal fat. So my skin was really, really dry, but it was so bad it would keep me up at night. It would itch, it just hurt. And when I started eating eggs, it was 2 days into my new egg eating, I woke up one morning and I could actually move my limbs and it didn't hurt. And I didn't even realize how much pain I was living in, but my skin didn't hurt. Like, my skin hurt from just moving. That's not normal. But I just accepted it as just life. Like, it didn't even occur to me that I was doing it to myself. So that was the skin thing. And then, another really minor one, but my feet, the bottom of my feet, I had plantar warts that just every year there were more, and I couldn't seem to get rid of them. And 2 weeks into eating broth every day, in the night, just gone. It was like a miracle cure. It's not a major thing, obviously, but who wants those things, right? They hurt, they're stupid, and they just evaporated. I haven't had a problem with them since. So I really want to say to the vegans out there who might be watching this that it's not a bad thing to engage with information. You don't have to shut off your brain from things that might seem scary or overwhelming or threatening. You don't want to be a fundamentalist, especially if you're young. Like, the whole point is to keep engaging. It's the whole point of democracy. It's the whole point of being an adult human, is you have to keep engaging. And you may find information that is scary or threatening out there. It's okay, you'll survive it. And at the end of your life, you want to be able to say, I had these ethics, I had these morals, and they were so important, they drove me to dedicate my life to them. You want to make sure that in fact your actions matched the things that were important to you, and the only way you're going to do that is if you keep testing it. So keep your mind open, like, let this information in, let yourself explore. Is anything that we're saying making any sense? Like, could some of this be true? Wouldn't you rather know? So that the best way to serve animals and to serve the planet may not be what you're doing. It might be something else. And it's not wrong to engage with that a little bit. Like, it won't destroy you overnight. You're allowed to think about other things. and see if it matches. Well, what do I think I know? Why might that not be true? Is it true? Could this be true? Like, you're supposed to do that with your brain. Like, you have this incredible gift. It was made over 2 million years. It's a brain. It is an incredible thing, right? Like, you have to let yourself use it. Don't shut yourself off from the rest of the world because you're afraid. And I know it's scary. I would not have wanted to hear this when I was 20. I did everything in my power to keep it at bay, and it didn't work long term. And that's the biggest regret of my life, is that I did not let that information in sooner. And you don't have to do the same thing. You are allowed to learn from my mistakes.
That's great.
Because I know they're going to freak out.
Yeah.
Like, I would have been so terrified of this film when I was 20 years old.
Yeah.
I would have been terrified. And I get these letters all the time. I bought your book 9 months ago. It's still sitting on my shelf. I can't make myself read it.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, it's going to fuck with your world. I'm really sorry. It's just a book, though. You can decide. You don't agree with me. That's fine. But, like, don't let it just be, oh my God, I'm so afraid. Like, you have to engage. You're not alive if you're not engaging. I do sometimes hear, especially white vegans, make this claim that they're spiritually, more evolved than the rest of us because they're eating meat. And it just sort of makes me reel back a little bit. Like, if you ever hung out with any indigenous people, none of them are vegan, and you really think that you have something better than what they've been doing for thousands of years, and like their level of connection to the plant people and the animal people, and incredible ceremonies that you might get invited to if you're really lucky and very humble. Like, please join us. And it's all about being grateful to the ancestors and to every other living creature. That's literally what it is to be part of that religion, part of that spiritual outlook. And I just find it's sort of humiliating as a white person to have like that level of ignorance running around. But please, would you travel a little bit? Like, that's the best way. I just meet some other people and see how it is that they like approach life, death, food, what's involved in staying alive, and their reverence to the bison or to the fish or to whoever it is that's keeping them alive is just, it's so humbling to be a part of that. And I'm just amazed that in this day and age somebody can still be, it's ultimately really racist, like how anybody can still be that entitled and that just oddly racist superior thing. Like, really, we're going to call people savages? Like, what's next? Like, no, you're not morally superior. You're just kind of in denial about what goes into your food.